Welcome to the LDN Radio Show, brought to you by the LDN Research Trust. I'm your host, Linda Elsiegood. I have an exciting lineup of guest speakers who are LDN experts in their field. We will be discussing low-dose Naltrexone and its many uses in autoimmune diseases, cancers, etc. Thank you for joining us. Today we're joined by Kelly from the United States, who takes LDN for MCAS and POTS. Thank you for joining us today, Kelly.
Thank you for having me, Linda.
So could you explain to us, when did you first notice that there was something wrong?
When I was a child, I had severe GI symptoms. My first colonoscopy, I was 10 years old. So my GI symptoms were the first indicator that something was off with my body. I didn't receive a formal diagnosis until 2019.
That was a long time. So what happened in that in-between time?
Yeah. So my GI symptoms, they kind of wax and wane. I was a competitive athlete in high school. Could have played like Division III college basketball if I really wanted to. And went off to college, graduated, and my health just started worsening. My GI symptoms got worse. I started having rashes and hives, fatigue, headaches. And from about 2015 to 2019, I was on the merry-go-round of specialists and trying to seek answers that often patients similar to myself face, which was a very frustrating journey.
Were you often not believed?
Always, almost always not believed. Yeah. Yes, I think I have a lot of thoughts on the systemic factors that support that within our healthcare system, and also creative ideas to find solutions, because the reality is patients need help now. We can't wait for the system to change to support the types of physician interactions that undiagnosed patients need. And so in the interim, they need to be given resources and access to care that can properly diagnose. And I've learned a lot. I'm a social worker. I kind of have a unique perspective as a patient myself who had to navigate the US healthcare system, as a social worker, working at an academic school of medicine. So I see the inside structural issues that are part of the problem for patients like myself. My mom is a nurse practitioner, so I also understand the practical demands and issues from a provider standpoint that are put on physicians. And so I kind of have like a mental map of what fueled those years and the dismissal and the gaslighting, how the resources and the determination to eventually find physicians to help me, and then how I envision or re-envision care for patients like myself and how that's going to happen, because it's a problem. It's a big problem right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, with MCAS, it's multi-system, isn't it?
Exactly.
And organs, and the skin is your biggest organ in the body. It can affect absolutely everything. And
Yes.
even if you don't generally suffer with depression or anxiety, when you're dealing with so much, that creates the
It's a
anxiety.
byproduct.
Exactly. If healthy people, and I was guilty before I got sick, I was healthy, and you just assume that everybody else is healthy too. You don't realize the footsteps that these people, the shoes that they were walking. It's completely different when you see the other side of that. But being understood, get answers, get a diagnosis. I mean, with MCAS, as you said before, with Dr. Leonard Weinstock, once you've got that diagnosis, it's not that difficult to treat, to get it under control, if you know
exactly
what it is. But it's finding somebody who understands. And I've interviewed so many people who have told me that doctors aren't interested in listening because they've got too many things wrong with them. They haven't got time, they don't understand it, and it's not something we deal with. I mean, so heartbreaking, isn't it?
It's tragic. I mean, it's tragic. I think if I could go back to those years, and I think on one end, there's like completely gaslighting a patient. And then I think on the other end is dismissal. And I think physicians can fall on a spectrum with that. And if I could go back out of all those physician interactions, of all the specialists I saw, for, like you said, mast cell is a multi-system disorder. So it's presenting differently in different areas of the body. And what further complicates it is it looks differently in different patients. And physicians don't know what they don't know. And so I feel like pattern recognition is such an empowering thing for a physician to provide an accurate diagnosis. And if I could go back on all of those years and those physicians, I think what I've learned, right, when I can take the emotion of how awful those years were in terms of not being believed and really thinking this was a byproduct of my mind, right? Is I wished a physician could, if I could have, I wanted to be believed as an accurate reporter. I wanted them to trust what I was saying was really my experience. And if they could have responded and said, I believe you. I believe that these symptoms are as debilitating as you're reporting. I'm committed to helping you find answers. And if they don't have the skill set, send me to somebody who can. And Linda, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I mean, I could talk for hours about the diagnostic journey of mast cell, the issues involved, and how to resolve them. I think if I look back, again, I kind of have like a unique perspective because I see from many different lenses. I think I can say with a good amount of confidence, every physician goes into medicine to help. They want to help patients. I believe that all of these physicians that these complicated patients have encountered, when they had day one of medical school, they envisioned a patient like me or you walking into their office and, oh my gosh, this is such a curious case. How can I help find solutions? But what happens is the stress of the system that they go through, right? Medical school, residency, it doesn't, they have time limited visits, right? They're being asked to see more patients, and it creates an environment in which isn't inviting structurally, right? In the structure for a patient with multiple symptoms in multiple areas of the body. Then you take that a lot of them cannot be measured, right? So there's no way to objectively, you can say that you have fatigue and subjective fevers, but they're going to run a CBC and your white count is normal. So it's not an infection, you know, but the patient says, but I really feel awful. But the physician that doesn't know about mast cell, doesn't know about these disorders, are saying what they know and what they work up is within normal limits. So you must not have a problem. And so even if a patient with all of these symptoms gets in front of a physician who's curious, it may still not lead to a diagnosis because they're not equipped to help. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So before you found Dr. Weinstock, could you tell us what symptoms you were experiencing? If you could give us a typical day, what was it like for you from getting up in the morning to going to bed at night?
Yeah. So when I would I'll talk about like right before my diagnosis, I was having diarrhea from the second I woke up until in 2019, it was upwards of 30 times a day. So at that time I was, I'm needing to do math. I was 30 years old, having diarrhea up to 30 times a day, wearing Depends because I was having incontinence, breaking out in hives and rashes, having abdominal pain, trying to get through my work day as a social worker. I did have to take time off due to the completely debilitating nature of my symptoms. Fatigue, head pressure, feeling like there was a balloon in my head that needed to be popped. Weakness, severe nausea and vomiting, was admitted to the hospital several times pre-diagnosis for intractable vomiting. It was a very difficult thing to simply exist in the world. And if you asked a stranger on the street, they would not be able to see any of that. And I think that's part of the problem too, is these are invisible illnesses that you cannot recognize upon taking a look at somebody.
If you'd had to have rated your quality of life on a score of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, what would it have been at that time?
A 1. Physically, I think I could give it a 1 or a 2 because my relentless stick-to-itiveness nature my spirit was still determined and hopeful, but physically I was deteriorating before my own eyes. Yeah.
Okay. So how did you come about finding Dr. Weinstock?
Honestly, looking back, it was divine intervention, Linda. It really was. So I was declining significantly. At that point, my sister had recently been diagnosed with MCAS and was under a treating physician in New York. And so my sister reached out to her doctor and said, listen, my sister is in St. Louis. Are there any physicians that could potentially help her or evaluate her? And my sister gave me, a list, and everyone but Dr. Weinstock was concierge medicine, which as a social worker, I cannot afford. Thankfully, he was taking insurance. And so it actually happened that I was seeing a physician assistant at his office at the time. I didn't even know about Dr. Weinstock. And so I got in touch with his assistant, and she was like, drop off your records and he'll take a look at them. And so it's a really tender story because I was in it was a hard time in life. And so I dropped off my records, and I got a call that he's going to take on your case. And I saw him in like a few days. And it was so funny. He was like, do you want your 400 pages of records returned? I was like, no, you can shred them. And so I actually included, because he's published with my sister's doctor, so I included her records as well. And if you know Dr. Weinstock, he found a lot of it very interesting given our family history. And it's funny because I had something called a ploic appendigitis that had been seen in my appendix a couple years prior when I had really severe right lower quadrant pain and had gone to the hospital. And that was probably page like 246. And he emailed me and he was like, see attached. And it was this article that had been published about a ploic appendigitis and mast cell activation syndrome. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he actually read the records, because like for him to even sit like that was like in the middle of them. And so therein started our history of working together. And he honestly, I credit him with saving my life. And so, yeah, so then in 2020, I had like 11 hospital admissions for severe nausea and vomiting, which led to some neurological stuff. Then I was on TPN. Like, it's just been a journey. And if it weren't for him, I wouldn't still be working. I wouldn't still be functioning if I had not come into his care. I can say that with confidence.
So what was the protocol once you'd got that diagnosis?
Yeah. So the first thing was to get the GI stuff under control. So I went on an oral steroid, which I don't think he typically uses that, but I had severe diarrhea. And then it's been a little bit up and down, but started H1s and H2s, eventually added some additional mast cell stabilizers in. I also have a port, and so I use like IV fluids. And so we I could go through all the medications, but it is a quite comprehensive treatment plan. I mean, he jokes, he's like, you're like one of my worst patients, like not in like a negative way, but just like in it, you challenge me way kind of thing. And so I've tried other medications like Gleevec and some of those things, but they haven't helped. Ultimately, like he just saved my life. He was game changer. And I feel like for physicians, it all starts with curiosity, right? A physician has to be curious in these things, in these patients. And he definitely has curiosity in kind of the odd things. And I think it takes a special type of person to be able to do what some of the experts in the field are doing, right? Because a lot of standard conventional doctors, like it's just, they're brave to do this in medicine, and we need more of them.
So now, what are your symptoms now?
Well, I'm not my symptoms, so things have kind of progressed, and actually in some ways and this isn't something that probably is very marketable, but in some ways things have declined a little bit, and there have been twists and turns. And so my symptoms now, my GI stuff is pretty well controlled. Unfortunately, like some new issues have come up. So I'm currently like on steroids to treat some severe inflammation, and have been on them since October. So I'm dealing with, side effects from the steroids. We're trying to kind of identify like what are those underlying factors that haven't been treated that are still activating my mast cells, right? Because if we think about mast cell activation syndrome, there's a root cause that is, releasing this inflammatory response. And so my symptoms day to day are actually quite debilitating currently. But I feel just grateful to have a team that believes me as an accurate reporter. I mean, that is just, you ask anybody who went through years of gaslighting, that to have a physician in your corner who trusts what you're saying is true is honestly, like, that's all people want, right?
Exactly. Well, we've run out of time, but it was amazing talking to you today.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I didn't answer all the questions you
No,
needed.
that's fine. Absolutely fine. Well, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Linda, and good luck with the rest of all of this.
I'm Dr. Leonard Weinstock, a guy who's been prescribing LDN since 2005, and I've seen the wonders, and I keep on seeing them, especially in hard to diagnose conditions. They're not that hard to do, but once you know about mast cell activation syndrome, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, you'll find that 17% of your friends or relatives have one or more of these conditions, and you can help them. We're making a documentary to wake up the medical community, to educate the population, but we need funding. So please fund whatever you can afford, no matter how little. www.mcasfund.com. That's mcasfund.com.
Any questions or comments you may have, please email me, Linda, Linda, at ldnrt.org. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciated your company. Until next time, stay safe and keep well.